Today we are going to do info with basic word problems. And that's going to be page 22 in your interactive notebook. So pause if you need to add that in. And then when you're gluing into your notebook, you're putting your title page over here on the left. And then the second page of it over here on the right. So again, pause if you need to take time to glue that in. Okay, and today we're just looking at exactly that, basic terms that we use for word problems. So what are verbal words that we can use to represent mathematical operations? Okay, so we have multiple things. We have our basic key terms that we use. So for example, we know that addition is sum. Subtraction is difference. Multiplication is product. And division is quotient. But those aren't the only words that we can use. So we can also say things like addition is more than. Or we could say that it's added to. Right? We could use in addition to. Now, when we say more than, right, I always sort of tell my students any word that you can fill in there that also means larger than is fair game. So greater than, more ginormous than, anything along that regard is still going to work and is still going to be fine. So just always keep that in mind, that even though I might not write every single one of those things down, more than, greater than, larger than, more ginormous than, all of those are fine. Okay, plus, increased by, okay, so any of those are fair words to use for addition. Okay, then when we look at subtraction, subtraction can have anything like less than, fewer than, smaller than, tinier than, right? Any of those would be fair game. We could say minus. We could say decreased by. Subtracted from. Okay, so any of those are fair game. Multiplication. Product is our most common one, but remember this one has some weird ones, like the word of means to multiply. Times. We could say something like half a number, twice a number. Right, so this could sort of be replaced with twice a number, 3 times a number, half a number. Any type of thing in there could go in. Division is sort of our loneliest one. It doesn't get a lot of options. We have quotient, and we really have divided by, and that's about our list. I guess we could see the actual word division. We could see the actual word multiplication. Now, there are some other key terms that come up in story problems. So the phrase, a number, if we read the phrase, a number, that indicates to us that the value of the number is unknown, and therefore we need to write a variable. Okay, so for that variable, you could fill in X, you could fill in N, you could fill in any letter that you want to fill in. Okay, that whatever letter you feel sorry for, I would suggest using one that you feel comfortable working with in an equation. Okay, the phrase quantity, or the quantity, either way, followed by a description of some numbers, variables, operations. Okay, that's telling us that items need to be grouped together. Now, sometimes parentheses will be required, but sort of like I've said before, you can't really go wrong using parentheses. It's just whether or not they absolutely have to be there. The largest things that my students miss, okay, is that when we are translating, we always go in the order that we read, which is fine. We read a number, we write a number. We read more than, we write an addition sign. But when we read than, Than really tells us to change the order. So instead of doing it in the exact same order that we see, we are going to flip-flop it. So if we see 11 less than a number, right? Typically, we would go in order. We would say 11 less than, if we look at our list, tells us subtraction. A number tells us a variable. But because we saw this word than tells us that we need to flip-flop this order and turn it into an x minus 11. Now there's one other one that functions the same way, except I don't really love to write it down in the notes because my students tend to do it just because of how it's worded. Okay, if we read subtracted from, it also tells us to change the order, but that seems more natural. If I say 4 subtracted from a number, my students typically already realize, oh yeah, I need to subtract it from something, and that something is the number. So this is another one to be a little bit more careful of, but this right here is the one that my students make the most mistakes on. Then we also have some key terms for inequalities or equal signs, right? Anything that we sort of put on in between both sides of the equation. So if we read is, equivalent, is the same as, is equal to, okay, that is telling us to use an equal sign. Okay, if we see is less than, is fewer than, there's our less than symbol. Okay, is greater than, is more than. Now, just like I said before with the symbols over, is more than, is larger than, is more ginormous than. All of those are fair game. Is at most, is no more than. Now, these tend to sort of throw my students off, but this one right here, right, this is less than or equal to. Because if I say something is no more than, right, it's not more than, it is less than. And if something is at most $20, it's $20 or less. Okay, so same thing here, is at least, is no less than, is more than or equal to, is greater than or equal to. Okay, that's our greater than or equal to symbol. Okay, so here's how this works. Actually, I want to point out one more quick thing. Notice all of these up here. Is, right? We're seeing these is everywhere. Okay, and that is because if we see just more than by itself is addition. If we see is more than, that's our inequality symbol. Okay, that word is the difference between the operation and the inequality symbol. So if we look at how this works in an actual problem, okay, we'll say the sum. So we see the word sum. Sum tells us to write addition. If you don't know what it tells us to write, just go over here to your list and look and see what it tells you what it associates with. A number. Okay, we said a number meant to write a variable. So we're going to fill in whatever variable we want. So maybe an X, an N, a T. And 67 is tells us to put an equal sign. Negative 34, right? So we're just going one simple phrase at a time. Okay, so if we look at this next one, 8. So I'm going to write 8. Times. Now multiplication is a weird one because yes, this right here is telling us to multiply, but remember there's lots of different ways that we can write multiplication. So I always tell my students not to write down a multiplication symbol until they see what the next piece is. Because this now says a number, which tells us to write a variable. And when we write a letter, or a number, a variable next to a number, we end up with multiplication, right? We didn't need to fill anything in there to show multiplication. That just took care of itself. Is tells us to put an equal sign. And then we have 216, so I'm going to write down 216. This now then says what is the number? So basically what it's asking us to do is to take this equation that we just wrote and to solve it. So we undo multiplication with division. And we get x equals 27. Okay. So look at our next one. 5 tells us to write a 5. Less than. Now remember, less than told us to do subtraction, but it also told us over here when we read the word than, we need to change the order. So instead of putting this less than after, we need to start going in reverse order. A number. Okay, so for a number, I'm going to put a variable. Is less than. Okay, so is less than is my inequality symbol. So is less than is my less than. 25. Now, it might feel weird because this one says, what are the numbers? But remember, with inequalities, our answer is an infinite amount of numbers, so more than one. So if we start solving this, we'll add 5 to each side, and we will get s is less than 30. Number 4, we have 3 times the quantity. So we're going to put 3 times. I told you to hang on to that multiplication in your head, right? And let's wait and see what we write next. Times the quantity, right? The quantity over here told us to group things together using parentheses. So I'm going to put in parentheses. And what do you know? Parentheses is also a way to represent multiplication. So multiplication took care of itself. Of 4 less than. So again, when we're reading that less than is subtraction, but it's telling us to change the order. A number is 24. So again, this one's asking us to solve. Now, we haven't gone into detail with a lot of multi-step equations yet, but we're just going to introduce this idea right here. So if we have parentheses, right, we know parentheses tell us to distribute. So if we distribute that, this gives us a 3x minus 12. So this is really asking us to solve 3x minus 12 equals 24. Okay, so we'll undo subtraction with addition, and we will undo multiplication with division, and we will get x equals 12. Okay, and then our last one here, the sum, so we have addition, of a number is a variable, and 8. Is no more than. So if we're doing is no more than, that's less than or equal to negative 15. Okay, so we're subtracting 8 from each side. Negative 15 minus 8 gives us a negative 23.